Hey everyone, today I'm joined by Connor Powell, a city assessor. Property assessment plays a major role in commercial real estate, influencing property taxation, valuation, municipal planning, and investment decisions. Yet, it's a career path that many students know little about. So, today we're going to be discussing what an assessor actually does, how properties are valued, the relationship between assessment and taxation, career opportunities and valuation, compensation, and advice for students interested in commercial real estate. Connor, thank you for joining me today. To start off, can you tell us a little bit about your background and how you ended up becoming an assessor?
Yeah, absolutely. And thanks for having me here. I started my MBA. I got introduced by another student into assessment and connected with a bunch of assessors, and it sounded like a really cool opportunity. So when job opportunities start getting posted, I applied and really worked hard at it, and I got in, and I've been there for about a year now.
Amazing. Now, Connor, what exactly does an assessor do?
So an assessor is responsible for valuing properties. So they determine what the value of a property should be using mass appraisal techniques. And so what that is they take all the market data that exists that the municipality can possibly get their hands on, basically, and then they run it through a mass appraisal system, and that takes that millions of pieces of data and it combines it to figure out what the assessed value should be. And then the assessor is responsible for going through each one of those values and determining which ones are correct, which ones are incorrect. We look at sales, of course, is one of the biggest things to determine market values. You look at comparable sales. So what we'll do, for example, in that case, is we determine what sales are valid and which ones are invalid. So a valid sale will be a sale that's been on the market and is transacted what seems to be normally through at least arm's length distance. So the parties don't already know each other, for example.
Yeah.
And yeah, we can verify that it's valid. Once we do that, then we can use those sales as comparables, and then we can use those sales using the mass appraisal system to determine the values of other properties.
Okay. And now, for those of you who don't know, what are these assessments actually used for?
Yeah, so they're used for tax purposes. So I don't get to change what the tax rate is, but I do get to change what the value is that properties get taxed on. So that's how you take basically that the value of the property multiplied by the tax rate that's determined by the province, and sometimes partly by the municipality as well, kind of depending on where you are. And after that, you get your final value, and then that determines how much tax gets paid out.
Awesome. Okay. So essentially, it's all about determining how much each person pays in property taxes depending on what type of property they own. Awesome. Now, what type of properties do you typically work with?
So assessors work with all different types of properties. My portfolio is non-residential, so it's commercial retail properties.
Okay. So you're all in commercial now. I would assume there's someone who would be kind of all in residential, and that would be their specialty as well.
Exactly. Yeah, you got it.
Okay. Now, for you on the commercial end, what does a typical day to day look like for your role?
So it varies throughout the season. Right now, we're in tribunal season. So what that means is we've already set the values for 2026, and we have property owners and property agents who will sometimes be disputing against our values. They might disagree with them. They might be looking for a reduction on the value so that they can pay less tax. Whatever the reason is, they dispute with us. And we're at a period where we might negotiate with them a little bit, where we try to work it out with them. We try to find out, okay, is there a valid reason why maybe you think your taxes are too high? More importantly, why you think your assessed value is too high? And there might be, if let's say, for example, we've said that someone's space is 2,000 square feet, but it's actually 1,500. Well, in that case, that's a factual correction. We'll just make that change because we do want it to be accurate. But if there's a case where we've tried talking to them and we don't see any valid reason for it, and we certainly feel that with our data that this assessment is supported, then we build evidence and we actually submit that into tribunal. And at that point, once our evidence is submitted, they'll set a hearing date for us. And then we actually go to court hearings. So it's more of a kind of a quasi court. But yeah, we go to the hearings and we dispute against either the agent or the property owner. And then at that time, the panel will basically make a decision for us of what the correct assessment should be.
Really interesting. I had no idea that's actually how it worked, that there was actually kind of like a counter to this and that people could oppose it. Is that something that you see often? Are there a lot of people that have kind of an issue with their amount or that oppose?
Yeah, it's fairly common. Now, I know in residential and the municipality that I work in is less than 1% of people who file complaints. So
Okay.
it's quite low. In the non-residential side, it is higher, and that's probably because tax rates are higher.
Hmm.
So it's fairly common. Again, sometimes there might be a valid reason, and a lot of the times just looking for a reduction as well. It sounds like it's very like counterintuitive, like sounds like it's a lot of conflict, but it's not quite like that. If anything, I'm working with the agent to find the right value. We make agreements where possible, but sometimes we can't agree, and that's when we go to hearings.
Yeah, that's a great point. It's not like automatically, you're two opposing teams. You're looking to work collectively with them. If it's a factual error, then obviously you're looking to quickly rectify it. And then obviously there can be some scenarios where, you're actually against each other and you might not see eye to eye, and there's a procedure for that. But for the most part, you're just looking to get the correct result.
That's exactly it. Yeah, you nailed it. Yeah.
Now, what are some of the biggest responsibilities that people might not realize that come with the property assessment role?
Yeah, the biggest one by far is that the value that we determine, the tax rate gets applied to that value. And then real property owners, doing businesses and residential owners as well, they get taxed based off of that. So it's really important that our valuations are correct because tax value, we pay a lot of taxes in Canada, including in property tax. So it's extremely important that it's accurate. So there's a lot of responsibility there to get it correct and make sure that people are paying the fair amount, not under or overpaying.
Yeah, huge responsibility, really important work because yeah, like you're saying, you are, finding that valuation. That is what is determining the property taxes that are being paid for you on the commercial end, all these businesses. So a lot of responsibility that comes along with the role. Now, what skills are most important for someone that wants to be successful in this field?
It's a good question. And I see two things. So I see like the analytical side where you want to be good at finances or reasonably good at finances, or at least be able to understand it. So there's that side. And then there's also the interpersonal skills side where you're dealing with property owners and property agents, and you need to be able to negotiate with them, communicate with them effectively. You need to be able to have the empathy to understand that some people are concerned that their property values are going up, and you need to listen to why and understand where they're coming from, and then also be able to explain the municipality's viewpoints as well.
Okay, that makes sense. I can see that for sure. Now, I'm trying to picture like what the kind of analysis required for analyzing these properties. So, what actually goes into this analysis process? Like, how do you actually determine what some of these properties are valued at? Is it all comparables, or what else kind of goes into that factor?
Totally. So on the residential side, it will mainly be comparables. And on that side, you'll also look at property influences, which can be positive or negative. So for example, if you've got a stunning mountain view, for example, in that case, we would call that a positive influence that would add
Yeah,
value to your property. If you're right next to a dump, for example, which could certainly happen, that would be
yeah,
negative influence, right? And then there's all sorts of different ones in between, where you might be on a corner, which in some cases can be good. In other cases, depending on where it is, it might be busy, it might not be beneficial. So on the non-residential side, we send out assessment requests for information called RFEs, and we send those out to all non-residential property owners. We hope to get all of them back. Realistically, we don't get all of them, but we do get quite a few of them back. And then we look at the lease rates that are on there, and we determine basically what we expect a typical property to achieve for rent. And that's a really key part, what we expect a typical property to achieve, not exactly what every property achieves, because we assess based on market value. So what the property could achieve, again, not exactly what it does achieve. So that's how we come up with our market value assessments. So we take those rates and then we'll multiply it by the square footage that they have in their building. And then there'll be different subcategories as well. So, for example, ground floor on a main street and a retail property is typically going to be a lot more valuable than a three-story property on a commercial street.
for
But
sure.
the upper floor is not going to be valued at the same rate as a lower
Yeah,
floor, for example. So we'll subdivide further from there, and then we'll of course subdivide based on the area as well. If you're on a popular street that's very busy with lots of street traffic, in my line of work, like on the commercial retail side, that's probably where people want the restaurants and bars,
yeah.
and we'll typically see higher lease rates there. But now let's look at what actually happens in the market. And that's where we kind of can check our work and make sure that everything is performing how we believe the market is performing, basically. So, for example, if you've got a sale that's sold for way higher than we assessed it at, well, we want to know why. And there could be a reason for it. Or it could be a one off. That's possible too. One sale never makes the market. So that's where you look at a whole bunch of sales, really. The more sales you have, the better. And assessment's a lot easier the more data you have. In non-residential, you don't necessarily always have a lot of sales that are comparable. Where in residential, it's quite common that you have a lot of sales. You often have hundreds, thousands, maybe even tens of thousands that are comparable to some extent.
Yeah, no, for sure. You're going to have way more comparables on the residential side. Now, when you're evaluating a residential property, obviously it's more based on the comparables. For you, you're saying it's based off of the leases and also other comparables, and if it's favorable factors and non-favorable factors. Now, does it change if, like, when you're analyzing the lease, like, does the valuation change if it's leased or if it's a vacant property on the commercial side, or is that
It's a
not
good,
relevant?
it's a good question, and the answer there is yes and no, which is kind of a wishy-washy answer, truthfully. So typically, no, we assess at market value again based on what we think that the property could be achieving for rents. But if we see a property that's been vacant for 10, 15 years, for example, which is pretty rare, but at least in my portfolio, it's pretty rare. That's where we might ask further questions like, okay, well, why is it vacant? Is it a property manager that's just not performing well? Is it an owner that's not really concerned about leasing it out and maybe they're just holding it just so that they can sell the land for future value? That's a possibility. Or if there's something seriously wrong with the property, is there something that we're not seeing? And that's where we want to dive in and discover that. And if that's the case where we're seeing like a perpetual vacancy, we'll take a look and see, okay, well, what's really going on here? And in some cases, there are valid reasons for why it's vacant, and we need to consider that into the assessment. So we do look at things like that. But if it's a property that's been vacant for a few months or a year, um, no, it's not going to impact the assessment. And we do actually assess at what we expect the property to achieve for rental rates, but then we also assign a typical market vacancy as well.
Okay, so I find that really interesting because the way it works on the commercial end, like when you're evaluating a property, it's typically the net operating income divided by the cap rate. It's not only comparable, it's unique to each building's income producing ability. But now what would happen is if you had a vacant building, you would assess it as lower taxes, even though what could happen is, you could assign that value. They could find a tenant. Now the value of the building goes way up and they're not paying the correct amount of taxes on that. So it's good to hear that you have like kind of a vacancy built into it. So you understand what's already going to be happening, but you're finding what it should be when it's tenanted so that, there's not big discrepancies between vacancies and occupied buildings.
Exactly. Yeah.
So, what are some common misconceptions property owners have about assessments and property taxes?
Yeah, I think the biggest one, especially in my municipality where we do assess at market value, is that some people get really upset that when we raise their value, where we keep, we're doing that for no reason. We're just trying to get more tax out of them. And that's really not the case. If your value goes up, it's because the property value has gone up. So I'd say that's number one there. Another common misperception is that when someone sells their house, let's say for exactly $1 million, they would assume that then the assessment next year would be exactly $1 million. And that's actually not necessarily the case because we still, again, one sale doesn't make the market. So we actually still use mass appraisal techniques to figure out what the value is. And of course, that sale price will be valued in it. It will be a part of it for sure. But yeah, I'd say that those are kind of the two common misperceptions in assessment.
Yeah, and that's such an important part is that it really takes the mass market to get a good understanding. You don't want those outliers influencing it. If you're, on the residential side and there's a divorce in the family or an older couple is looking to downsize and maybe, they need a quicker sale and they just want to get out of the property. Well, if they're selling it for a lower valuation, doesn't mean that's the actual valuation of the home. It's just kind of their unique scenario, which is why it's so important that you get that large sample size, and that's why you're comparing it with the mass market.
Yeah, you understand it totally. Yeah.
Okay, awesome. Can you walk us through an example of how an assessment might change over time?
Yeah, absolutely. So really that's just the market value changing over time. So if a street starts to get redeveloped, for example, that could be a big thing, or zoning changes is a big one too.
Yes.
A street that's formerly just made for single family homes, let's say all of a sudden it gets changed to allow, big multifamily buildings, which does happen. All of a sudden you might see property values shoot up and therefore the assessments will shoot up with them. So really it's more not just a change in assessment, it's more accurately a change in market values. And that can be caused by a number of reasons.
So obviously, these property taxes are being based off of the market values. Now, in my head, the market continues to go up. But do you ever see scenarios where the property taxes actually become smaller?
Yeah, it does happen sometimes actually. And it's not always expected and there's not always strong reasons for it. It could happen where there's higher vacancies. And I've seen that happen before, for example, where one street is suddenly seeing like a lot of vacancies in that street. So in that case, we would raise the vacancies on that calculation there. So that would drive the property value down.
Okay, interesting. Yeah, so it goes both ways. This isn't something where your cheapest price is right now. This is going to fluctuate both ways with where the market is going.
It
Now,
totally does. Yeah, yeah. And in reality, we all kind of know that there is a trend upwards with real
yeah,
estate. We follow the trends. I would like to clarify actually that so we assess that market value where I work at. but there are some provinces that do not assess at market value. They sometimes do things a little bit differently.
Interesting. So what is it based on?
There might be a cap, for example. There might be like, okay, we're starting at this year, we're only going to raise property values for assessment a maximum of 3% per year, for example, which is arguably not equitable to the new purchase.
Yeah.
But it is a method in some places, and yeah, it's what gets used. We view our method as being the fairest. It's called ad valorem taxation, which is Latin for as per value. So we
Hmm.
certainly view that to be the most fair.
So the alternative is kind of like a fixed, steady increase. Is that right? Like kind of regardless of market condition, some areas may have just a fixed 2, 3% a year.
Yeah, that could be a way to do it. Actually, yeah, that's right. It's not necessarily the most fair in some ways, but other people will argue it is fair because, like, let's say, for example, someone bought their house for $100,000, which I'm sure you've seen happen or heard stories of, and wow, now the assessment's worth $2 million. Why am I paying $2 million, like tax on $2 million? I mean, there's some truth to that. I would counter argue and say, well, it's true, but you can sell your house for $2 million at a certain point in time. Like if you're assessing at market value, it's for a reason. But you also don't want to get people taxed out of their own homes or their
I
own
was
family
I was
homes,
gonna
right?
say, yeah, like
Yeah,
that could be the thing. Like you could purchase a price at a price that could currently be affordable for for that family, but then prices skyrocket, for example, and maybe the market value is more than they can afford to pay. Like they wouldn't be able to repurchase at that price, and the property taxes
exactly.
might kick them out of their own property.
And there's other schemes as well. Like there could be schemes, for example, in some jurisdictions where they'll make it so that once you sell the property, that's when you pay that extra tax that you haven't been paying over the number of years. Like let's say they might
Okay.
subsidize it for you.
Yeah.
I've even heard of upon someone's death, for example, that could be when the city takes back some of the taxes. Depends on where you are for sure. Like economics, you can really argue both ways on some of those things, which is interesting. And just because this is the most fair system for most people, which I believe it is, it doesn't
Yeah.
necessarily mean it's the most fair for everyone.
Now, this is it's something I've been curious about. So, when the property taxes are collected, are all of those funds set and dedicated for kind of specific maintenance and improvements for the city or region, or is it kind of collected with all sorts of other taxes from like income tax, sales tax, and kind of used for funding all sorts of tax funded projects?
Yeah, they will actually have it allocated for separate things. So in my municipality, they have a certain amount that's allocated towards the city, and then a larger amount actually is allocated towards the province.
Okay, so a portion is going specifically for that region, and a portion is going provincially to fund all sorts of other public services. Okay.
Totally. Yeah, you got it.
Now, I'm curious, like sometimes you work from home. Is this something that happens often? Is there a lot of kind of like hybrid flexibility or
Yeah, where I work, it certainly is, and I can't speak for every city or municipality for sure, but where I work, we work in office 2 days a week on one week, and then the next week we work 1 day a week in the
one
office.
day a week in office
That's
and then
right.
the
Yeah.
other
So
week,
the rest
two
is
days a week?
remote.
Okay, so there's a lot of hybrid flexibility in this.
There is, yes, and that's also a great benefit as well.
Yeah, it's a huge benefit. I'm sure that's going to really be appealing to a lot of people. Those that are looking for those hybrid positions, while here working as an assessor, 1 or 2 days a week, you could be in office and then at home a lot. That's quite a flexible hybrid schedule. Okay.
Yeah, it's really great. A lot of people appreciate it.
Now, for students that are interested in walking your footsteps and getting into the assessing role, how would you recommend that they break into the industry?
I would say take a look for those internships, get to know the city staff there, go on the city website, for example, or wherever you're from, and just learn more about it. And yeah, I mean, start applying. But as we all know, if you can kind of connect your way in, if you know people in there, or grab a coffee chat with someone in there, that makes a big difference. You can also call the city or municipality and ask about your property tax bill. You can ask about your parents if that's easier if you don't have your own home, which is totally fine, and just ask them some questions to learn about it. There are some schools. There's a school in Guelph, for example, that does actually specialize in assessment. So that could be something that people would want to consider. There's UBC as well out in Vancouver, where they also do it. So yeah, there are universities now that are designated towards that path.
Now, I'm curious, like what the career progression looks like. Let's say for the people that know from the get-go, they want to be an assessor, they're in university, they're looking for internships. Firstly, what kind of internships do you think that may be? And then where do they kind of go from there?
Yeah, so I see one of two paths. There's the data entry side, which again is a very important role. And then there's also the customer service side as well. And that could be where you're on the phone and actually talking to taxpayers who are concerned about their property bills, or maybe they have questions, or they're just looking to know where to go on the website, for example, to find out how their property tax is calculated and how their valuation is calculated.
Okay. Now, in terms of the pay structure, obviously, this is
Yeah.
something that a lot of students find really interesting. So, as an assessor, is this a stable salaried position? Are there any variable pay elements in this? What does that structure look like?
Yeah, it's a good question. And it's strictly a stable salary and there's no variable pay whatsoever. And that's very important because you don't want to add any bias into the mix. So let's say you're an assessor for the city, for example. You certainly don't want to hear as a taxpayer that city staff are getting bonuses of any type for, anything kind of work they do with assessment. It's definitely very important that that one remains unbiased. There might be performance incentives in the sense that you can move up through the organization as you improve and as you get better, but I would certainly agree that strictly no compensation bonuses for extra performance, and certainly no bonuses for increasing taxes. I would want to clarify that too.
Yeah, that's such a good point. I think out of all the roles, the one where you would definitely want to see 100% on these stable salaries here. You don't want it to be I raised your taxes and here's my bonus for it. So I think exactly that removes the bias, that keeps everything, neutral. So it's all salary. Now, for someone who's starting off, I'm curious, let's say, what would someone be earning in their first year? Then let's say from like year 3 to 5, and then after 10 years working as an assessor.
Yeah, so it varies so much depending on where you live. The nice thing about working public is that you can find all of that information online. So I would say that the range starting out, depending on where you're at, will be between $50,000 to $80,000 per year. Varies very much between the municipality, where you're working, what you're doing for them. You'd be moving up. And I mean, once you could, because you could become a manager and you could go even higher than that. You could be approaching, like, when you get really, really high up in your career, if you can get that far, which a lot of people don't, truthfully. You could be approaching the $200,000 mark, but there is an upper limit for all government positions. Basically, we are public servants. So
Yeah.
the nice thing about that, though, is there is transparency. There's a clear path for moving up as well. You know what you're at. You kind of know what everyone else is at, or at least you have a sense, anyway.
Yeah, exactly. So it's going to vary province by province, city by city. So check it out on the municipality. Public information is very accessible. You'll be able to figure out what that career path looks like and the pay associated with that as well. All right. Now, for the final question, Connor, what kinds of person do you think would make a great assessor? And who are some people that you think should stay away from the role?
Totally. So I think that someone who's got that good mix of interpersonal skills and analytical skills, I think will thrive in that role. I think that someone who doesn't shy away from numbers is important. Someone who doesn't mind looking through a lot of data, because something that sort of surprised me is I feel like I'm an assessor, but really I'm also a data analyst. I look at all different types of data all day long. And then the other really important side is someone who has the interpersonal skills and even the conflict management skills to be able to clearly communicate what and assess value, why it's assessed that way, to be able to handle complaints. Another part of our role, as I mentioned, is going to hearings. So basically, kind of going to quasi court to dispute against an agent, and you're presenting in front of a panel. So if someone's intimidated by that, they might want to reconsider the role. If I'd say it's maybe not for them if they're afraid of that conflict.
So, Connor, thank you for taking the time to share your experience and insights with us today. I think many students are familiar with careers like brokerages, development, and investment, but far fewer understand the importance of the role of assessing and the value it plays within commercial real estate. So, hopefully, this conversation gave viewers a better understanding of how properties are valued, how assessments influence the industry, and what a career in this field looks like. So, thanks again for joining me.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Lorenzo. This has been a lot of fun.
Awesome. And thank you all for watching. If you enjoyed this interview and would like to learn more about careers in commercial real estate, be sure to subscribe for more videos coming soon. I'll see you in the next video.